Hi, and welcome to Third Eye Thinkers. I'm your host, Megan Benanti.
And I'm your host, Michelle Welch. And we are very excited to have a special guest with us today. And I am just going to launch right into his bio. Davide de Angelis was born in London, England, and is an award-winning designer and visionary artist. He worked directly with David Bowie and his company Isolar. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Davide? Is it Isolar?
Correct.
Okay, Isolar.
Isolar. Yeah.
Isolar for more than 7 years, designing album art for Outside and Earthling and helping to conceptualize and create stage sets, books, and art shows. Davide is also a writer, philosopher, and creativity facilitator, excuse me. His work is renowned for its experimental and beautiful ways of using language and images to powerfully communicate ideas and open people to astonishing possibilities. He strongly believes that art has the power to revolutionize how we engage with the realm of business, ideas, and ultimately how we engage with life to express our fullest potential. Inspired by life's adventure and a passion for learning, Davide spent over a decade training with shamans and energy masters from both East and West, and he regularly leads workshops on personal transformation. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thanks for joining
Thank
us.
you.
That's so awesome. Okay, so how did you get started in this trajectory? When in the beginning, when you first met David Jones or David Bowie, how did you guys get involved with this co-creation?
Oh, I mean, it was interesting because I kind of always had my mum used to play David Bowie nonstop in our house when I was a kid. So I felt that I had a kind of an intense relationship with Bowie even before I actually met him. And of course, when I was a teenager, I loved his music. So really, when I started working with him, it was a very natural flow. So we were able to, it was very obvious that we shared a lot of ideas and interests in different things. And, in a sense, it was really just like, it might sound strange, but it was really just like hooking up with one of my friends and saying, what is it that we'd love to create and how we're going to do that. And so there was a very natural flow into how we were working together. And, he first contacted me to work with his on an album concept. And really from there, we kind of developed different ideas and we worked on many different things, over a number of years together. And, every particular project had its own dynamic and was different. And, Bowie was such he was really a very actualized and vital person. And so, just working with him was a big catalyst, especially, in my own life, and brought about many kind of amazing things. So it was difficult, in answer to your question, it was actually difficult to not work on your optimum creative level when you were engaged with someone like David Bowie. So I'm not sure whether that actually answers your question, but
No, that's beautiful.
It was a very natural flow.
How did you guys, well, it sounds like a lot of, like you guys were in alignment, really. And it seems to me that maybe you had some synchronicity of how he found you. I mean, I know it seems to me that you believe in synchronicity, and you mentioned alignment, that you guys just were in the flow immediately. But how did you meet each other initially?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back a lot of years. My dad actually ran an Italian restaurant in central London, in Soho. And Bowie actually went into that restaurant several times. It was actually just around the corner from Trident Studios, where he actually recorded the famous Ziggy Stardust album. Wow. And so the first actual live glimpse I got of Bowie was when I was about 10 years old. So it was kind of strange that we actually kind of met way back then. And then it took another 20 odd years until we met again. But he actually saw some of my work in a magazine when he was flying from London to New York. And I don't think there was any recognition that it was actually, some kid that he'd met in 1974 or whatever, 1973. But obviously something resonated with him with the work I was doing. And at the time, I was really looking to sort of revolutionize it. I was kind of a young revolutionary. So I think in terms of my artistic ambitions, and I think that he obviously picked up what I was looking to create there. And he literally telephoned me when he got to New York.
Oh,
So
wow.
the magazine had actually, it was the days when it was kind of just before the internet really hit. Well, it was before the internet really hit. And the magazine actually published my studio's telephone number. So he contacted me directly and spoke to me on the phone. And then the very next day, he flew over to London, and we were literally sitting opposite one another. So it was kind of almost within 24 hours of us speaking, then we were actually working together.
Amazing. Well, and I do remember the days before the internet. So
Me too.
yeah, we're right there with you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that eventually all of your artwork, you decided to put it into tarot, and I was just curious as to how that came about, why you went in this direction. And we told you before we went on air how much we love the deck. It's just beautiful. It's been so well received, at least by the people we know, very, very, very well received, and in my stores. So why tarot?
Yeah, it goes way back with me to when I was a kid, and my I can't remember whether it was one of my aunties or something, but someone bought me a tarot deck when I was probably about maybe 9 or 10, and I think they bought it by mistake. I think they thought it was just a normal, regular deck of cards. But I remember opening that. Yeah, it was kind of one of those things. And and I was so into art, really. I kind of announced that I wanted to be an artist when I was 4. So it was, just opening that and seeing the images of the tarot was I was almost captivated from that moment. And I really always felt that I was going to create a tarot deck, and it was, as a child, it was kind of an inexplicable feeling. It wasn't really articulated in the way I'm explaining it now. When you're a child, you sort of, it's almost very visceral. There's a sense within you that there's something needs to happen, and you're not always quite, like I said, articulate enough to actually understand what it was. But as soon as I saw that tarot deck, I had a real intense feeling that I needed to create something like this. And really, I suppose I do explain this a little bit in the book, that I felt that this tarot deck was almost like following me through life and waiting for the right moment for it to manifest. And I, talking about synchronicity, I really feel that, when I started working with Bowie, it was a bit like the tarot deck itself had its own energy and its own directive. And it was a bit like saying, well, this is the moment I've been waiting for. Now you can start to conceptualize me properly and bring me to life. So that's really how that relationship with tarot started, and how that came to life, really when I was working with Bowie and the ideas we were exploring artistically.
Okay, so you did actually, as you created the deck, I wasn't sure if maybe some of the art came from other things you were working on. So all of this was actually created specifically as a tarot deck. I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I kind of, in a way, I'm a big fan of eclecticism, but the tarot, this particular tarot deck was, not that I've created any others, but I had many attempts to sort of do oracle cards and things like that, and they never really gelled with me. I was never really happy with the results that I was getting. It was a bit like there was something missing. So in terms of this deck, I really literally started, the ideas that I was exploring with Bowie had a real power and a resonance. There was a sense that there was something in the vocabulary, the artistic vocabulary that we developed, that had a potential to really communicate something profound. And so I really felt that this deck commanded itself into being and wouldn't allow me to sort of bring other things into it. It needed to be created as the tarot deck exclusively, for its own purpose. It wasn't like it would allow me to sort of say, oh, well, here's another piece of work I did and I'll bring that in, where that was always tempting. But it was really as if this tarot deck has to be literally developed from a blank sheet in terms of the imagery.
That's amazing, because it does feel alive. It feels like it's its own organ or its own being. Even parts of it literally look like, the physical heart that's in the body. So super powerful in that regard.
Right. There's so every image, every card, I say to a lot of people that when I'm telling them about the deck, that even if they don't know totally how to use the cards yet, that they could even take one card, and one card will have so many powerful messages just within that one card. Mm-hmm. And Megan and I, we've talked about that on the show before, right? Mm-hmm. About this deck and how beautiful it is. Especially, I'm going to ask you what your favorite card is, but I love them all. It's hard to choose a favorite, but I'm a little frilly sometimes, and I love the Empress. That's one of the cards that I really love, and a lot of people, it jumps out at them. I know some of the other cards are like POW, maybe, and you've changed some of the wording, like the Fool is the Sacred Clown or Sacred Clown. But tell us a little bit about the Empress, please, because I love it. I really can't choose a favorite. And then tell us what your favorite card is, if you have one. I bet you can't choose a favorite.
Yeah, okay. I sort of start backwards, actually, because really my favorite card's the Empress too. So,
oh, wow. I love it.
Yeah, I have a real affinity for that card, and it just speaks to me of this sense of real fecundity and beauty and kind of the divine feminine, the goddess principle, but also really the idea of how we bring things to life, and that that life is underpinned by this incredibly miraculous, it's kind of an exuberant quality of life. And, she, for me, really represents that, our ability to tap into the flow, to be just, the mysticalness of the mysticism of life, the mystery of life, to explore, to celebrate it. So, she's a real celebratory figure for me. And, in a way, one of the cards that I most enjoyed creating. So it's funny that you should pick that out. And
yes, I love that synchronicity really again there, right?
yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, love that.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit.
I forgot the rest of the question. But
well, it was a long question. It was, what's your favorite card? Is really what it, and you said that was one of your favorites. Yeah. I also mentioned the fact that you had changed some of the names of the cards, like the Fool you changed, and I believe I know I had them pulled out earlier, but tell us a little bit about, in the majors at least, some of the names that you changed the names of and why.
Yeah, basically there's only kind of 3 cards that I've played around with, and you can't believe the kind of agonizing over that. It was almost embarrassing to even talk about it. It's it's one of those things that there's the Alien, there's the Starman,
and the Sacred Clown.
And the Sacred
Clown, yeah. So in a way they're different, but they're the same. And it was kind of like the Starman is the ultimate magician and the alchemist. In many ways, the alien Messiah, who comes to show us something very different and to move energy around and life around in a different way. The alien, in a sense, kind of is the hermit. If you even say, like Bowie's portrayal of the man who fell to earth, it was the outsider, the one who comes from somewhere else, the one who's distanced from other people and brings forth new knowledge, new information, and new wisdoms into life. And the sacred clown really is kind of the Hyoka, the one who turns life upside down and shows us kind of almost the absurdity of life and the absurdity of our own kind of complaints and excuses and irritations and the things that also the things that we take to be true about life. I'm it sounds almost like an oxymoron. I'm a great believer in that there is no ultimate truth. That we live in a highly malleable reality, and I think that's where the tarot is so fascinating. That it presents this kind of infinite possibility, and then crystallizes it into ideas for us. So, I really feel like the sacred clown is, in a way, the character that I feel most connected to in terms of Bowie is the sacred clown. The wise joker who can really see the cosmic joke. And the other thing was that Bowie had such an infectious laugh, which was so amazing that you almost couldn't help bursting with laughter the minute that he did. So that card has a real resonance for me in terms of my the work that I did with Bowie. So that's kind of why perhaps my other favorite card, and it's a bit off the wall as well. So that kind of goes with how I feel.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, I love the off the wall. What I feel, and sort of some of the things you said about no, specific truth. You didn't say it like that, but I'm a big believer myself in, like, everything's energy, everything's dynamic, everything's cyclical, and we tend to look at things so linearly, and just flatline it. And these cards do not flatline anything. They have motion, they have movement, they're spiraling, they're cyclical, and I love that about the cards. And I feel that. And that energy that just flies off the cards, like you said, Megan, they come alive. Mm-hmm. Which cards maybe gave you some struggle, if any?
Well, perhaps I shouldn't say 78.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It is fair.
But that kind of is, in a way, it's interesting because, many of those cards, the whole deck really came in terms of like a whole download. And it's a bit like, like often they say that when people have deeply spiritual experiences, or, even like Kundalini experiences, yes, that it's almost too much for these little human frames to take. The energy, right, is so great. And that's kind of how I would describe this tarot deck sort of coming to me. It in a way, it arrived in such a powerful form, and I could see the images, and I had dreams about how the card should be. And then it's kind of like it's a bit like I said, one has an enormous, maybe, a big spiritual awakening, and then you wake up the next day and you've got to take your kids to school, and right, you've got to function somehow in kind of normal world, as I put it. Yeah. And it was a little bit like that. I had this enormous download of these images, and this kind of thing spanned over a number of years. I mean, really, I started to have this whole thing when I was working with Bowie, and the ideas that we kind of catalyzed together in terms of our artistic ideas, and then really once Bowie passed away very sadly in 2016. The whole intensity of this just went from, kind of being sort of humming away in the background to something that was kind of almost completely unavoidable for me. I just had to do it. In terms of the ease of the cards, that what I'm saying, a very long way of saying, is that it's one thing to visualize something in your head and have a very clear picture about it, and it's a very different thing to actually be able to articulate that artistically. So I think, in a way, I struggled and wrestled with every single card in that deck. Some cards were a lot more resistant than others to actually do what I asked them to do. The particular card that caused me perhaps the biggest problem was the Five of Swords for some reason or other. That seemed to be a watershed, and I kind of knew that if I could figure out the Five of Swords, I could create the rest of the deck. I was kind of about halfway through when I encountered that. Yeah, it was kind of like, what are you prepared to pay for? What's the cost of what you're doing? Are you prepared to pay that cost? Can you take the revelation that moving through that resistance will give you? And almost like what sword do you need to put down? What are the things that are costing you too dearly that you need to let go of in order for you to move forward? And it sort of caught me at a time in my life, a particular period where at that stage I wasn't feeling enormously optimistic, and it just was that cutting point, and I knew if I could get past that, I could really bring this deck to life. So that was a significant card for me.
Wow, that's really cool.
That's beautiful, and the struggle, and that card is about that anyway. I love how you explained that. I'm going to be rewinding and listening to that. I love how you explain that card, because it's a difficult card anyway, I think, for a lot of people to interpret. So speaking of that, people loving your cards, I know you have this like vibrant Facebook following. I'm on that group, and everybody's so involved on Facebook. They love you and they love this deck. So that you're loved, and the deck's loved. But tell us maybe about some of the people who haven't received your deck as well as others.
Yeah, well, that's such an interesting thing in a way, because of course, my little human ego is wounded every time I read a terrible review of the deck. It's almost impossible not to be touched a little bit by people's criticisms. And I kind of divide those criticisms into two categories. There's the one camp really that sort of will complain, that this is printed on the wrong card and the box is too heavy, and there's kind of that camp, and and I kind of understand that. That's fine. I can, I can get where they're coming from, but in a way, I would say that in a sense, they're kind of missing the point to a large degree. Those things can be developed down the line, but what I'm really offering with this deck, it's a powerful. It's kind of a philosophy. I call it a spirit technology, and it has a very specific purpose, which is to really open people up to their creativity, and for them to fully express themselves, to live as fully creatively expressed human beings. So there's a very deep purpose encrypted into the deck. And I think if people are kind of like fiddling around and mincing around, worrying about whether it's 300 GSM or 350 GSM in terms of card weight, I mean, that's fine, but that's just talking about product. And actually they're not thinner than any other cards. It's just
they're not bigger. Actually. No, they're just taller. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have someone who, that offers a genuine criticism of something and takes the time to actually explain why they're criticizing something, why they feel that it's not appropriate. And, and I fully respect those people. And actually those people are, those people are very valuable. They're incredibly valuable in terms of, I see this deck as kind of, I think, you talked about it earlier. It's almost like a living entity. It's like a being in and of itself. They're not 78 disparate pieces of art. They're 78 things that communicate, and they're intertwined and communicate with each other. It's a dynamic, open system. It's not a closed system. It's a very dynamic system. And, I feel that there's always room for forms of evolution within, when something's an open system, it encapsulates the things that are valuable, even if those things are criticisms, and it's able to use those things. So, I can imagine that at some point, in the future, I don't think I'm quite ready for it yet. There will be an evolutionary phase to the deck where, you know, some of the things that I've found valuable in terms of people's so-called criticisms will somehow find a way to be expressed in the deck. And the important factor there is that it takes this deck out of being just kind of just something created by me. You know, I really feel that, you know, the wonderful thing about the tarot is that it's used, and it's, you know, and in particular, this deck seems to strike a chord with a lot of people. And I just get such wonderful communications from people sort of explaining what they've got from the deck and how they feel it's shaped their lives. So in a way, this deck becomes like a very vast collaboration of lots of different creative ideas. And, you know, my job really is just to be, in a sense, the interpreter of this energy, and, you know, the one who can finally render it into some kind of tangible form. So I'm very happy to have people criticizing it, as long as it's not just kind of like you know, empty criticism. I think, you know, very powerful constructive criticism is always valuable, and I'm really happy to listen to that. So I'm not so encouraged when, you know, someone says, oh, you know, I don't know, the box is the wrong shape. It doesn't really tell me very much, because, you know, it doesn't have much value in terms of how we can develop and improve something.
Right. Well, you know, for me, listening to what you were saying, every deck is a living, breathing being, some more so than others. This definitely has a life in and of itself. And if we think of this is your child, and somebody were to walk up and say, man, you got an ugly kid, you know, that's just not the kind of thing that we do. But that when people are making open criticisms like that, to whether it's to you or Chiro or anybody else we know, it is really, really hurtful. And it's people aren't thinking about the effort and the labor of love and the context that this is something that you gave birth to. And I think that's a very important comment. And I loved how you really connected with it and spoke of it that way, not just as your project, but as something that you gave birth to and created. Because to me, it is very alive. You've actually done something that most artists don't do as well, that I'm very passionate about with the tarot, is that you didn't put the borders on. And so for me, you know, I can lay one card next to another card and see how those lines interconnect. And so it really is like a story. It moves from one into the next, and that's really significant in the way that I read. So I'm completely just blown away with it.
Right. I don't see, and just let me be shallow, I love the box.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. I mean, I don't even know where that would be a criticism, to be honest. I think that's one of the things that makes it just pow with this lightning bolt. I mean, it's fabulous. So
I also have to say that it was doubly significant for me as I was looking at it just today, because I had done some energy work. I received a Reiki session from Michelle maybe a month ago, and there was a particular symbol that she gave me, which happens to be this lightning bolt as part of my meditation mantra to work on. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really supposed to work with this deck.
Oh,
so,
yeah, so
totally.
true. Yes.
So, okay, I have to ask a question, though, about the Five of Pentacles, because this one has been coming up regularly in readings for people. Yeah. And it's interesting to me because there is a line through it. And we've got these sort of earthly beings below, and then the pentacles are elevated, and to me, in a much more spiritual realm. But so why the line?
It's kind of like what could be described, you know, kind of, I suppose, the hero's journey kind of vernacular as a kind of liminal boundary. And it sort of symbolizes the fact that, you know, often we live our lives a little bit like beggars, you know, and there's a great story of, I can't remember who, a lot of spiritual teachers talk about it, is the beggar sitting on a box for 30 years. And someone eventually says to him, well, you know, have you thought of opening the box? And he opens the box and it's full of gold. And really this card is very much like that. The beauty and wonder of our lives. It's not something that is separate from us. It's actually right there. And, in a sense, we often, I think, especially in our Western cultures, although we have so much, very often we kind of live like beggars, and we're always searching for something, and we're always like, I think the Native Americans sort of said when the white man, he's always searching for something, he's always looking, he's always nervous. We don't know what he wants, and I think that's in a sense that's very true. That we live these kind of lives where we're constantly, it's almost like we've got our hands out, we're looking for something all the time. We're hungry. We're hungry for something. And that card is really sort of saying, well, you don't need to kind of live like a beggar when life itself is so rich and it's right there within your grasp, and you're just not seeing it at the moment. It's right behind you. And those figures, if you look there, they've got, sort of tin cans full of fish bones and that, and, they've got nothing, it's as if they're kind of, they're in this desperate situation, and this beauty, this wonder is literally right behind them, and they can't see it. And it sort of symbolizes how so many of us in our culture live our lives. I think, the beauty and wonder of life just shoots past us, and whilst we're looking at our phones, or we're busy, caught in a traffic jam or something, or we're worrying about things that aren't necessarily, it's more about things that aren't necessarily important. So we somehow seem to lose the ability to actually prioritize things. We sweat the small stuff, and the really important stuff goes unnoticed. So that's really what that card communicates. Well, it's always communicated to me.
Yes, well, that was excellent. So I was just curious about your thoughts on it, because it's been so repeated in my life recently. I felt like it wasn't just for my clients as much as I've been seeing it. Part of it's something I needed to see in it. So
I get that card quite a lot myself, by the way, Joe. It's I think it's one of those cards that sort of it's a little bit like it tells me, I'm not saying that it's telling you to do this, but in my own personal case, it sort of tells me, hey, look, wake up, just stop, look around you, look at the sunlight, be grateful for the things that are really abundant in your life, and know that life has an abundance and an incredible richness to it. So that's what it communicates to me when I get that card. So yeah.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah. How are we on time?
Matt, are we about out, or what do we have left?
You've got a couple minutes left, so.
Okay. So
and I know, and also thank you for joining us. I know aren't you catching a flight out? Are you good on time?
Do you know what? I'm not doing that now. It's like, okay. My life's a bit like that. It's sort of, it kind of like twists and turns all the time, and I kind of live. It's like I'm on a perpetual skateboard, really.
I love that. So. Although like I was saying, not linear. It's a perpetual skateboard. That's the way to put it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, so let me ask one last question. If you were to give our listeners some counsel in using your deck, like what would be your favorite suggestion for them?
That's a great question. And I think what I would suggest to them is, I would say the pretty much the vast majority of my audience are very creatively minded people. And I would say that to use this deck in a way to ask questions about how you can really express yourself creatively and how you can bring, your ideas to life. It has obviously working with Bowie and having that huge influence that the deck has, the work that I did with Bowie, it's very potentializing for creative projects. It's very potentializing for creative ideas. So I would, I'd strongly advise people that if there's something that they want to express creatively, or they want to bring their creativity to the forefront of their life, then to kind of just play with this deck, and it really is that sense of play. Creativity is, like it is life. I think there's an actual saying, life is consciousness at play, and I think that, I don't want to offer like prescriptive ways to work. I think the deck will speak to you strongly and communicate with you and give you its own directive as how it wants to work with you. It may be very formalized spreads for some people. For other people, it's something that's very random, and like we've said, it's always in a sense non-linear, but it somehow it augments itself to the people that it works with, and it communicates strongly the message that it needs. Those people need to have, and that's really my experience of the deck, and my advice to anybody coming to it fresh is just really play with it and let it play with you.
Yeah. Awesome. Love that. Thank you so much for joining us, David.
Thank you so much.
This is awesome.
Yes. And I know you have a book too. Could you just tell us the name of your book? You've written a book.
I've actually written 5 books, funnily enough.
I apologize.
And I'm kind of like I'm slightly undercover with those. There's a book that I wrote that sold very well actually in 2012, and it's called The Guiding Principle. And you can get that. I think it's now available on Kindle, Amazon. It was available in print, but I actually had someone pirate it, and Amazon took it down, thinking that someone else was selling it cheaper. I also wrote a book, a science fiction novel called The Seed, which, funnily enough, if you look at it, David Bowie actually wrote an endorsement that's on the cover of that book, and that's available worldwide on Amazon, and I think through various bookshops as well. I wrote a book called Dynamic Love, which is really about how to connect with the guiding principle of life that I talked about in the other book, how to really work with that and trust the flow of your life. And then I also wrote a book about money, of all things, and it's called Secrets of the Money Shamans. And it was about, how to really open yourself to it. I felt there was a lot of kind of overly new-aged spiritual concepts around money, and I really wanted to write something again for people that were very creatively minded about how you could use your creativity and bring that sense of abundance into your creative work and your expression. So there's a few books kicking around out there that they've got my name on them. So
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great, because I think when I look at and I know we're wrapping up, but when it says, that you are a designer, an award-winning designer and visionary artist, and then you're all the things that you say, the stage sets, books, art shows, and you're a philosopher. You just bring to me magic and creativity, and the magic into, maybe for lack of a better word, the mundane. And I love that about, there's just so many aspects of you and I think that's why so many people are drawn to you and your work. I noticed it immediately on Facebook with your group, immediately, and also how you are so approachable and you interact with the people who have fallen in love with your work. And we just really appreciate that, and we appreciate you coming so much on the show.
Yes,
thank you so much. Yeah,
it's really a great pleasure to be on there, and I really feel kind of enormously humbled to get such a wonderful response to the work that I'm doing. And like I said before, the work's really, it has a purpose behind it, and really, I have a very strong purpose to help as many people as I possibly can to fully express themselves and connect with their creativity, and to bring that to life for them, and for them to experience the real abundance of what that brings to your life when you're fully creatively expressed. So just having an opportunity to talk with you and get your slant on things has been so valuable, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mutually good.
Yes.
So
I guess we're going to wrap up for today.
Yes. So thank you all for listening to Third Eye Thinkers. If you don't mind, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our show and give us a 5-star review if you have time. Those are really important for us. Thank you for David joining us, and keep Third Eye Thinking.